Boring mystery for sleep. It began as a typical night out. Kanneka Jenkins, 19, left her West Side Chicago home on the evening of September 8th, 2017. She told her mother she was going bowling with friends. It was around 11:30 p.m. Nothing felt different, but Kanneka wasn't bowling. Around 1:30 in May, she checked into a room high up in the Crown Plaza Chicago O'Hare Hotel in Rosemont with a group of friends. Cameras captured her walking into the elevators, laughing, socializing, relaxed. That's the last anyone saw of her alive. Later that night, she stumbled through the hotel lobby, caught on camera at 3:20 a.m. She looked disoriented, unsteady but upright. No one offered help. She pressed on. 3 minutes later, at 3:32 a.m., she exited a lower-level elevator again, this time heading toward the kitchen area. Surveillance shows her entering a service hallway. After that, the footage ends. There's no video of her entering the freezer. But we know what happened next. Around 5 May, her friends realized she was missing. They had her phone and her car, the thing she borrowed from home. They called her mother, who rushed to the hotel. She was frustrated. Staff told her they couldn't release video until someone filed a missing persons report. That wouldn't happen until about 7:14 a.m., when police were finally called. Officers eventually reviewed surveillance for 36 hours and focused on 47 cameras. But the cameras, none showed Kanneka actually entering the walk-in freezer because the freezer door was outside the camera's field. Still, footage traced her path to the kitchen hallway before the door to the freezer. At 12:25 a.m. on September 10th, more than 24 hours after she vanished, a hotel staffer discovered Kanneka's body face down in a walk-in freezer. The door was closed. The freezer was still running about 34 degrees 2 hours after discovery. The dual door, a walk-in cooler, then freezer, was known to be heavy but functional. Interior lights and safety release worked. The medical examiner's report came days later. There was no trauma consistent with the struggle. No forced overdose, no assault. Toxicology found alcohol as 0.12 back and topiramate, a migraine epilepsy drug not prescribed to her. Hypothermia was the cause of death. Mucosal lesions consistent with cold exposure were found. Brain swelling common and hypothermia was present. No evidence of foul play. Officially, police ruled it an accidental death. They said she entered the freezer on her own. No one forced her. No one closed the door behind her. Hypothermia and tragic misadventure. But unanswered questions weighed heavily. How did Kanneka, stumbling and confused, find that service hallway? Why did it take so long to find her in a hotel the size of a small town? Why was there no footage of her entering or even someone else following her? Her mother, Teresa, refused to accept accident. She watched the video, saw the time wasted, and from the moment she learned her daughter's body lay unmoved for a day, something in her broke. She filed a wrongful death lawsuit. She demanded answers. In December 2023, the family was awarded a $10 million settlement. McDonald's, the hotel, and others were named negligent for everything from weak kitchen security to failing to shut down an illegal party. Police maintained their stance. No foul play. Video backs that. Still, communities didn't forget. Creators on YouTube, Twitter sleuths, conspiracy forums all took up the story. Some suggest hotel staff locked the freezer door behind her. Others say her friends knew more. Some ask if she was targeted or just lost in the chaos. In 2025, Kanneka's closest friend, Zari Walls, drowned under mysterious circumstances. More questions followed. Still, no one was charged. No one held responsible. The case remains officially closed, an accident in the eyes of the law. But in the quiet of night, the story lingers. A teenager far from home, stranded in confusion, finding her way into an unused part of a hotel, locked inside a freezer. forgotten by time and routine. It's a tragedy born of missteps and maybe indifference. As the hum of your engine carries you forward, think of Kanneka. Let the chill of that freezer settle softly in your thoughts. And remember, not every accident walks into the light. Between 1979 and 1981, the city of Atlanta was shaken by a series of horrifying murders targeting African American children and teenagers, a period now known as the Atlanta child murders. At least 28 young lives were taken, leaving deep scars on families and the community. Understanding the victims, their lives, their last moments, and how they were found adds a human face to this dark chapter. One of the earliest victims was Nathaniel Cater, a 13-year-old boy who disappeared in October 1979. He was last seen walking home after buying snacks at a store. His body was discovered months later in a wooded area, strangled and discarded like so many others. Nathaniel's death was the first clear sign that a serial killer was at work. Then there was Denise Birth, just 14 years old, who went missing in April 1980. Denise's body was found by the Chattahoochee River, hidden among dense underbrush. She had been strangled, a pattern that would tragically repeat in many of the murders. Her death sent shockwaves through the community, as it became clear this wasn't an isolated incident, but part of a deadly pattern. Larry Rogers, Jr., 14, disappeared after visiting his aunt's house in March 1980. His body was discovered in a remote section of the Chattahoochee River months later. He had been strangled as well, and evidence suggested he might have been thrown into the water while still alive. Larry's case drew attention to how vulnerable these children were, even within their own families and neighborhoods. Other victims include Yusef Bell, a 16-year-old boy whose disappearance added to the growing fear. His body was found near the railroad tracks in September 1980, again strangled. Similarly, Charles Stevens, 14, vanished in August 1980 and was found weeks later in a ravine, his death a grim echo of those before him. One of the youngest victims was 7-year-old Clifford Benjamin. His disappearance horrified the city and intensified calls for action. Though his body was never recovered, his name remains among those lost to this tragic series of murders. The way the victims were found reveals the killer's method and cold cruelty. Many bodies were dumped in secluded areas, dense woods, riverbanks, abandoned lots, places that delayed discovery and complicated investigations. Strangulation was the most common cause of death, suggesting a hands-on personal method of killing, which added a layer of chilling intimacy to the crimes. Each victim had a family left devastated and searching for answers. Many were children with siblings, friends, and dreams. Their disappearances and deaths tore communities apart and brought attention to the vulnerabilities faced by Black children in neglected neighborhoods during that era. Despite the conviction of Wayne Williams for 2 adult murders and suspicion around many of these deaths, The full truth about all the victims remains unclear. Questions still linger about whether other killers were involved, or if all cases were properly investigated. The victims' stories are often overshadowed by the broader mystery, but remembering their names and lives is crucial. This tragedy highlighted not only the failures of law enforcement, but also the social inequalities that put these children at risk. Their memories continue to inspire calls for justice, reform, and community vigilance, ensuring that these young lives will not be forgotten. Wayne Williams was definitely a figure who made people uncomfortable long before he was officially a suspect in the Atlanta child murders. Neighbors and acquaintances often described him as strange, even creepy. He wasn't your typical young man in his early 20s. His behavior was odd enough to raise eyebrows, but not so overtly alarming that people reported him to the police right away. For starters, Wayne had a reputation for being socially awkward and withdrawn. He wasn't someone who fit in easily with his peers. People said he liked to keep to himself, hanging around the neighborhoods in ways that didn't quite add up, showing up in places where he wasn't. He expected or lingering in areas at odd hours. Some kids and adults felt uneasy around him because he would stare or watch quietly, sometimes without saying a word. That silent, intense presence made many feel on edge. His lifestyle was also a bit unusual. Wayne worked as a music promoter and was involved in the local entertainment scene, but he was known for his rather secretive nature. He didn't have many close friends and was often described as mysterious. There were rumors about him being involved in illegal activities, but nothing concrete surfaced initially. Still, people whispered that something about him was off. Even more unsettling was his connection to the neighborhoods where the children disappeared. Wayne was often seen driving around in his car near those areas, sometimes late at night. He had a habit of cruising through neighborhoods where the murders occurred, which made people suspicious once the killings started making headlines. Some locals recalled seeing him talking to kids or hanging around bus stops and parks in a way that felt predatory. When law enforcement started zeroing in on him, they found other strange details. His apartment was cluttered and filled with piles of fibers and materials, later used as part of the forensic evidence linking him to the victims. This obsessive collection of fibers fueled the idea that he was meticulous and controlled, traits often associated with serial killers. But before this came out, neighbors simply called him a weirdo. Despite all this, it is important to note that many who knew, Wayne also said he could be charming in brief moments, which made him even more dangerous. People tend to let their guard down around someone who seems personable. This dual nature, creepy loner on one hand, somewhat charming on the other, helped him avoid suspicion for a long time. In the end, Wayne Williams's odd behavior, combined with his presence in the neighborhoods where the murders occurred, painted a picture of a man many wanted to avoid but didn't fully understand until it was too late. His weirdness wasn't just a quirk. It was part of what made him a suspect and what allowed him to slip under the radar for so long. If you want In the early 1970s, the streets of Washington, D.C. were gripped by fear. Between 1971 and 1972, a chilling figure haunted the city, an unknown predator who preyed on young African American girls and women. This shadowy figure would come to be known as the Freeway Phantom, a name that captured the eerie, elusive nature of his crimes. He took 6 young lives, vanished without a trace, and left a community desperate for answers that never came. The victims were young girls, all African American, aged between 10 and 18. Each came from humble backgrounds, neighborhoods where hope mingled with hardship. They were daughters, sisters, friends, each with their own dreams and stories. Their names were Brenda Woodard, Diane Bryant, Shirley Ann Moody, Jane Lynn Smith, Brenda Crockett, and Carol Spinks. Their lives were brutally cut short, their disappearances striking terror into the heart of the city. The pattern was hauntingly similar in each case. Each girl was last seen walking alone, usually near bus stops or streets close to their homes. They were out in the late afternoon or early evening times when children should have been safe, yet the phantom found them vulnerable. The common thread was their route along highways and freeway ramps, hence the chilling nickname Freeway Phantom. After they vanished, the girls' bodies were discovered in secluded wooded areas near highways, discarded like trash. They were found nude, strangled with their own clothing, their throats brutally cut. The execution-style murders bore a signature of cold calculation and cruelty. It was clear this was the work of a single individual, someone who knew the city well and could evade capture with ease. Adding to the mystery, the killer sent a taunting letter to the police, mocking their inability to catch him. The letter was cryptic, filled with arrogance, and suggested a deeply disturbed mind who enjoyed the hunt as much as the kill. Despite this chilling communication, the police were stymied, their leads cold, their resources limited by the technology of the time. The investigations into the Freeway Phantom were extensive but fraught with difficulties. Forensic science in the early 1970s was not what it is today. DNA testing was decades away. Fingerprints, eyewitness accounts, and crude profiling were the tools detectives had. Yet the Phantom remained a ghost, leaving behind no fingerprints or concrete clues. The city's social and racial climate further complicated the case. The victims, being young black girls from economically challenged areas, were part of communities often overlooked by the media and law enforcement. Their disappearances did not make national headlines. The urgency and resources poured into these cases were nowhere near what might have been offered if the victims were from more privileged backgrounds. Several suspects were considered. One was a local man with a violent history who had worked near the highways where some bodies were found. Another was a truck driver who matched some witness descriptions, but no charges were ever brought. The evidence was circumstantial, the leads evaporated, and the case grew colder with each passing year. Theories about the Phantom's identity and motives are many. Some believe he was a serial killer driven by deep-seated hatred or trauma. Others think he was a local with a personal vendetta or mental illness. Some suggest the killings were the work of a group, though the consistent method points to a single killer. The truth remains buried in silence, a phantom itself. The impact on the community was profound. Families lived in constant fear. Children were warned to avoid walking alone. Vigils were held, and parents pleaded for safety. Yet the city was left vulnerable, haunted by a predator who disappeared without a trace. The Freeway Phantom became a symbol of fear, injustice, and the fragility of life. To this day, the Freeway Phantom case remains unsolved. The 6 young victims are remembered, their stories told to prevent their erasure by time. The case underscores the failures of the justice system and the urgent need for improvements in how missing persons cases, especially those involving minority communities, are handled. Though decades have passed, new generations continue to be fascinated by the Freeway Phantom. Advances in forensic technology raise hope that someday the truth will surface. Cold case investigators revisit old evidence, and communities remember the victims not just as names, but as young lives full of potential. This story is a somber reminder of lives lost and the shadows that can linger over cities. It calls us to listen, to watch, and to never forget the vulnerable among us. The freeway phantom's identity may remain a mystery, but the hope for justice and peace lives on. Shankella Robinson, known lovingly as Quella by those close to her, was a young woman with a sparkle in her eyes and a dream that seemed just within reach. At 25, she had already carved out a promising path. She was a skilled hairstylist with her own business, a student working toward a better future, and someone who carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what she wanted. Friends described her as joyful, ambitious, and fiercely loyal. Her life was the kind that many would envy, filled with hope and the promise of tomorrow. But beneath that bright exterior, Quella carried the scars of life as struggles many young Black women face but are rarely told in the headlines. She grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina, a city with its own history of racial tension and socioeconomic divides. Despite challenges, Quella pushed forward, determined to build a better life for herself and her family. She was close to her mother, Salamandra, who stood as a steadfast pillar of support. Together, they nurtured dreams that stretched far beyond their neighborhood. In late October 2022, Quella decided to take a trip that many young people dream of, a getaway to Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. The plan was simple: a group of friends renting a villa to enjoy the sun, the ocean, and a brief escape from the everyday grind. Sabio was a place famous for its stunning beaches and vibrant nightlife, the perfect backdrop for memories in the making. They booked a luxury villa, expecting a weekend of fun, laughter, and bonding. The trip started as expected, with friends taking pictures, enjoying the pool, and sharing stories under the warm Mexican sun. But something dark and terrifying happened behind the scenes that no one expected and no one would ever forget. On the night of October 29th, the chilling turn unfolded. Quella was found severely injured inside the villa, unconscious and gravely hurt. What was initially whispered as a tragic accident soon spiraled into a nightmare. When paramedics arrived, the story given was that Quella had passed out from alcohol poisoning, a scenario sadly all too common in party settings. Her friends claimed it was an unfortunate consequence of drinking too much and that she had simply lost consciousness. But the truth was far more sinister. Medical examinations in Mexico revealed injuries that went beyond any typical accident. Quella had suffered a fractured spine, severe trauma to her neck, and multiple contusions indicating a violent assault. These injuries were not consistent with falling or fainting. It was clear she had been violently attacked. The police investigation was launched, and what was once a vacation turned into a crime scene investigation. In the days following, chilling videos surfaced online footage that showed members of Quella's own group physically assaulting her. The images were horrifying. A young woman, defenseless and begging for help, being attacked and laughed at by those who were supposed to be her friends. The footage contradicted every story of an accident and painted a disturbing picture of cruelty and violence. This was not just a tragic accident, it was a brutal and deliberate attack. The Mexican authorities quickly classified the case as femicide, a term that means the killing of a woman because of her gender, a problem that Mexico has faced with alarming frequency. Femicide in Mexico is a crisis, with thousands of women disappearing or being murdered, often with impunity. Quella's death became part of this grim narrative, shining a spotlight on the vulnerabilities women face both abroad and at home. The prime suspect was one of Quella's friends, a man who was quickly arrested and charged. The U.S. government, recognizing the severity and international nature of the case, got involved. The FBI worked alongside Mexican officials, and the story made headlines around the world. But even as the investigation intensified, many felt justice was slow and incomplete. When Quella's body was finally returned to the United States months later, another complication emerged. An autopsy performed in the U.S. yielded inconclusive results. The delay in conducting the autopsy, along with the embalming process, had compromised the evidence. Conflicting medical reports only muddied the waters, creating confusion and frustration for Quella's family and supporters. How could such a high-profile case be so fraught with uncertainty? Her mother, Salamandra Robinson, became a tireless advocate, refusing to accept the mixed messages and the delays. She spoke out publicly, demanding transparency and accountability. Salamandra questioned why such a promising young woman's death had been mishandled and why the system seemed reluctant to fully pursue justice. Her grief was palpable, but her voice was strong, a mother fighting for her daughter as dignity and memory. Public outrage grew as more people learned of the videos and the suspicious circumstances surrounding Quella's death. Social media erupted with the hashtag Justice for Queelele, fueling conversations about femicide, violence against Black women, and the dangers many young women face even while traveling. Her story became a rallying cry for activists working to raise awareness of the epidemic of violence against women of color worldwide. The complicated relationship dynamics among Quella's group of friends added layers to the mystery. Why had people who traveled together and shared intimate moments turn on her so violently? Theories abounded. Some speculated jealousy or personal conflicts escalated fatally. Others believed there was a deeper, more sinister motive hidden beneath the surface, perhaps greed, manipulation, or cover-ups. The inconsistencies in the friends' stories only fueled suspicion and distrust. Beyond the personal tragedy, Quella's story highlighted broader societal issues. It exposed the fragility of safety nets for Black women and travelers abroad, the gap between law enforcement in different countries, and the difficulty in bridging those divides. It also sparked conversations about how femicide is often underreported or minimized, especially when victims are Black or traveling internationally. The case also forced U.S. authorities to reflect on their approach. Many questioned why federal charges were not pursued, despite the overwhelming evidence. The reluctance to move forward was seen by some as a failure of the justice system to prioritize cases involving Black women, further inflaming public frustration. Despite the setbacks, Salamandra's fight for justice remains relentless. She filed a civil lawsuit against those she holds responsible, seeking not only accountability, but also to bring greater attention to the dangers faced by women like her daughter. Her story is a reminder that grief can be transformed into advocacy, that a mother's love can drive change even in the darkest times. Shankela Robinson's life, though tragically cut short, continues to inspire. Her legacy is one of courage and resilience in the face of unimaginable pain. She is a symbol of the urgent need to protect vulnerable women everywhere, to ensure their stories are told and their lives valued. As long as people remember Quella's name, as long as her story is shared, her light continues to shine through the darkness. Her death is not just a statistic or a headline. It is a call to action, a plea for justice, compassion, and change. The world must listen because too many Quellas have been lost, and too many still face the same dangers. For her family, her community, and all who believe in justice, Quella's story will never be forgotten. Ever seen again. These are their stories. Felipe Santos, October 14th, 2003. Felipe was 20. Arriving or leaving. Neither did cell phone records. Felipe's family never heard from him again. Several days later, local Mexican restaurants filled with stories. Neighbors reported seeing Felipe in the company of police that night, his face bright with relief, heading into a convenience store. But the convenience store's own video footage never materialized on official record. Terrence Williams, January 12, 2004. Terrence was 27, a loving son and father of 4, driving his Cadillac home when it stalled near a cemetery. Deputy Calkins pulled him over. Multiple eyewitnesses saw Calkins cuff Terrence, put him in the patrol car, then drive off. Calkins claimed he towed the Cadillac, then dropped Terrence off at Circle K, but he couldn't say how he got there or if he even saw Terrence again. Naples residents in the area reported seeing the tow truck, the police car, even Calkins himself. One employee at the cemetery insisted she saw Calkins handcuff Terrence, watched him leave alone in the patrol car. The tow truck driver returned with the Cadillac, but no Terrence. Yet again, no surveillance footage, no jail intake, no calls home. Just silence, patterns and parallels, 2 men vanish. Both were last seen in the same patrol car. Both left in tow truck custody, according to Calkins. Both never appeared in booking logs. Their families were left with no answers, no bodies, no goodbye. Deputy Calkins' statements. Stephen Calkins told Florida investigators a nearly identical story in both cases. polite stops. He changed his mind. He dropped each man off at Circle K, but his memory shifted. At first, he insisted he remembered both stops clearly. Later, he said he wasn't sure. At one point, he misplaced the patrol car's logbooks. He claimed in interviews that he didn't recall towing Terrence's car. Yet he did. Investigations and wake-up calls Collier County Sheriff's deputies, the FBI, and Florida's Department of Law Enforcement investigated. They searched the cemeteries, used cadaver dogs when Calkin sold his house, and examined his records. Despite this, no traces of Philippe or Terrence were found. Calkins agreed to 3 polygraph tests. One was inconclusive. One suggested deception, one suggested honesty. No review committee cleared him fully, but no criminal charges followed. Still employed at the time of Terrence's disappearance, he was fired later for inconsistent statements and for avoiding investigators. But his firing came years later, and only after pressure from families and media attention. Families in limbo, Marcia Williams, Terrence's mother, wrote heartbreaking letters, pleading publicly for help. She believed her son's disappearance was tied to justice and a callous use of police power. Felipe's family, thousands of miles away in Mexico, demanded transparency and answers. Public figures got involved. Tyler Perry, attorney Ben Jealous, and Reverend Al Sharpton urged federal accountability. A $200,000 reward was offered. A wrongful death suit led by civil rights lawyer Ben Crump was filed, then dismissed in 2020. The families got no compensation and no conviction, but they never stopped fighting. Theories. Exposure tactic. Some speculate Calkins used a starlight tour, tactic dropping men in deserted areas to walk home. Philippe and Terrence disappeared into the darkness, alone and vulnerable. Hidden burials. Others believe bodies were buried in remote areas, dense woods, gator-filled canals, or under house renovations. The cadaver dogs gave no direct results, but searches weren't exhaustive. Single bad actor, many suspect Calkins acted alone. There's no evidence of accomplices. There's no proof he killed them on camera. But his changing stories and failure to preserve evidence painted a troubling portrait. Corruption cover-up. Some theorize a police conspiracy was at play, evidence hidden. Cameras prevented from capturing footage, tow logs destroyed, but nothing has been legally substantiated. Media and culture. The case has gained national attention through documentaries, podcasts, and TV episodes. Never Seen Again, produced by Tyler Perry, brought renewed scrutiny. Investigation Discovery featured the case on Disappeared. Deadline, Crime covered it too. Podcasts like The Last Ride trace back to January 12, 2004, the day Terrence vanished. Journalists have questioned whether justice will ever be served. Why it matters Philippe and Terrence vanished from police custody. Their disappearances highlight disturbing themes: police trust, racial and immigrant vulnerabilities, missing men of color, lack of camera oversight, and power abuse. These are more than cold files or statistics. They are living wounds for families left behind and haunting stories begging for resolution. Where the story stands now, Calkins was never charged with a crime. He lives free. He lost his badge. He refuses to talk. Investigations are technically open, but no breakthroughs have emerged. No bodies have been found. No convictions. Only unanswered questions. Philippe and Terrence weren't thieves or anomalies. They were human beings taken by a system that should have protected them. Both vanished behind blue lights and police tape. Both are still missing. Both deserve answers. Akia Eggleston was 22 years old when she vanished from Baltimore, Maryland, in early May of 2017. She was beautiful, vibrant, heavily pregnant, just weeks away from giving birth to her second child. She had a 4-year-old daughter, a tight-knit family, and big plans. But in the span of a single weekend, she disappeared without a trace. No public scene, number 911 call, no viral alert. Just silence, the kind that chills the bones and leaves families aching for answers. Akia's story is one of quiet resilience. She had grown up in Baltimore, the product of a large, blended family. People who knew her described her as sweet, thoughtful, and determined. She was navigating the complexities of young motherhood, holding on to hope even when life got heavy. By 2017, she was balancing the demands of being a mom while preparing to welcome a second child into the world, this time a baby boy. Despite medical complications that had placed her on bed rest, Akia was optimistic. She had plans to move in with her boyfriend and build a new home together. There were baby showers scheduled. Social media posts showed balloons, diaper cakes, and messages of joy. On the outside, everything seemed in motion, normal, even. But behind the scenes, there were fractures. Her boyfriend, Michael Robertson, was 36 years old, older than Akia by more than a decade. He was already in a relationship with another woman, and some say he led a double life, straddling two worlds while avoiding full responsibility in either. Akia's family had their suspicions. There were tensions, inconsistencies, and uncomfortable silences when his name came up. Still, she trusted him enough to plan a future together, and that trust would cost her dearly. On May 3rd, 2017, Akia was seen withdrawing $450 in cash from her bank account in downtown Baltimore. Security footage showed her moving slowly, visibly pregnant, with effort in every step. She was scheduled to attend her own baby shower that weekend, but when the big day arrived, Akia didn't show. No texts, no calls, no apologies, just absence. Her family immediately knew something was wrong. This wasn't like Akia. She was dependable, even more so now that she had a child on the way. Days went by with no word. Calls to her phone went unanswered. Eventually, a missing person report was filed, and the search for Akia began. When police entered her Cherry Hill apartment, what they found only deepened the mystery. Most of her furniture was gone. Her bed, her dresser, empty. No signs of a struggle. No blood. No. It was as if she had moved out in the middle of the night. But Akia was on bed rest. She could barely carry herself, let alone an entire apartment's worth of furniture. There were no moving trucks, no calls to friends asking for help. It didn't add up. Investigators soon zeroed in on Michael Robertson. He was the last person Akia had texted. He had also disappeared, claiming to have moved to Michigan shortly after she went missing. His behavior raised flags. He wasn't involved in the search. He didn't attend vigils. He didn't issue statements or plead for Akia's return. Instead, he went quiet, vanishing into the background like a ghost. As detectives dug deeper, they discovered disturbing details. Phone records showed that Akia had contacted Michael multiple times on the day she withdrew the cash. The money, it turned out, may have been meant for a down payment on the new place they planned to move into, but there was no lease, no keys, no apartment waiting. It was all a lie. Years passed, the case stalled. Public attention ebbed and flowed. Flyers were posted, interviews were conducted, and Akia's face appeared in news segments, but the case never gained the kind of national traction that similar disappearances of white women often did. Her family, frustrated and heartbroken, fought to keep her name in the headlines. Finally, in 2022, 5 years after Akia disappeared, a grand jury indicted Michael Robertson on 2 counts of first-degree murder, one for Akia and one for her unborn child. Prosecutors laid out a chilling theory. They claimed Michael lured Akia to a location under the pretense of moving in together. Once there, he killed her and concealed her body. Investigators revealed that in the weeks before her disappearance, Michael had searched online for how to destroy evidence and how long it took for a body to decompose. His phone pinged in areas far from his home, and his alibi collapsed under scrutiny. The motive, they believed, was simple and cruel. Michael didn't want to be tied to a second family. He had lied to his main partner about the baby. He didn't want to pay child support. He didn't want the complications. So, according to the charges, he chose murder over responsibility. In July 2023, after a lengthy trial, a jury found Michael Robertson guilty. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. But despite the conviction, Akia's body has never been found. There is no gravesite, no ashes, no place for her daughter to lay flowers or whisper goodbyes. Just the lingering question, where is she? The case of Akia Eggleston raises uncomfortable truths. It reveals how society often overlooks Black women, even in tragedy. Akia wasn't a headline for long. Her story didn't trend for weeks, but her disappearance speaks volumes about the way systemic neglect and interpersonal violence intersect. She wasn't just another missing woman. She was a mother, a daughter, a sister, a friend. She loved hard. She planned for the future. She deserved better. In the aftermath, her family continues to advocate not just for Akia, but for all women of color whose disappearances don't receive the same media firestorm. Organizations like the Black and Missing Foundation continue to amplify these stories, demanding the same urgency, the same resources, the same dignity afforded to every life. Akia Eggleston was not forgotten. She is mourned, remembered, and honored. But her story remains incomplete. Somewhere out there, someone knows what happened. Someone remembers that weekend. Someone saw something, heard something, or helped cover something up. For now, the search for her remains continues. The case is legally closed, but emotionally open. Justice, in the form of a courtroom verdict, has been served. But closure is something else entirely, and it won't come until Akia is found and brought home. Until then, her name lingers in the air, spoken in prayer, in grief, in protest. Akia, a name that means sister in Swahili. Fitting for someone who has become a symbol of both love and loss in a city still reeling from the echo of her disappearance.